When you think of the Industrial Revolution, what comes to mind? For many of us, the first thought is of smoky factories belching out pollution into the air, or of trains chugging across the land, carrying goods and people to far-off destinations. These things are indeed symbols of the Industrial Revolution. But have you ever stopped to think who was behind these inventions? One man who comes to mind is James Watt, the Scottish inventor considered to be the father of the Industrial Revolution. Born in 1736, Watt's contributions to engineering and industry are monumental. He improved the steam engine, invented the first rotatable steam engine, and developed the separate condenser, which greatly increased the efficiency of the steam engine. All these innovations were key to kickstarting the Industrial Revolution. But how exactly did his steam engine work, and why was it so revolutionary? Well, before we get into that, let's start at the beginning. Long before Watt was born, scientists had been trying to harness the power of steam. You see, steam engines use heat to create mechanical motion. When heated, water turns into steam, which expands and pushes against the walls of its container. If you could control this expansion, you could turn the steam into a powerful force that could do useful work. The first crude steam engines were invented in Greece and Egypt, as early as 250 BC. But it wasn't until 1698 that Thomas Savery, an English military engineer, built the first practical steam engine. Savery's engine used steam to pump water out of mines, but it was bulky, unreliable, and dangerous. It also wasted a lot of energy. When Watt was in his early 20s, he was given the task of improving Savery's engine, and this is where his genius really started to shine. While working on the project, Watt realized that instead of pumping water with the piston like Savery had done, it would be more efficient to simply let the steam do the work. This led him to develop the separate condenser, which allowed the steam engine to operate more efficiently. His engine could now produce a much higher pressure with less fuel, meaning that it could do more work. But there was still a problem. Watt's engine was still too bulky and expensive for most people to use. However, in 1775, he solved this problem by inventing the first rotatable steam engine. This engine could rotate, which made it much more versatile and easier to use. It could now be used to power machines like looms and spinning frames, which made it much more useful for manufacturing. So why was Watt's steam engine so revolutionary? Well, it's because it provided a cheap and efficient way to harness the power of steam. This meant that steam power could be used to do all sorts of different things, like running factories, powering mills, and even driving trains. In fact, Watt's steam engine is credited with powering the first locomotive that ran on rails. The impact of Watt's invention on industries like manufacturing, transportation, and mining was huge. It allowed factories to produce goods much faster and more cheaply, which in turn lowered prices for consumers. It also made it possible to transport goods and people more quickly and easily. And in mining, it made it possible to pump water out of mines more efficiently, which allowed miners to work in safer conditions. In fact, steam power was responsible for some of the biggest changes during the Industrial Revolution. For example, steam power was used to develop the first automobiles, the first steamships, and the first airplanes. It also led to the development of new technologies like the Bessemer process for making steel, which led to the construction of the first skyscrapers. Before Watt's innovations, most goods were produced by hand, which was slow and expensive. But with the help of steam power, goods could be produced much more quickly and cheaply. This led to an increase in productivity and economic growth. Steam power also helped to transform society. It led to the growth of cities as people moved to urban areas to take advantage of the new job opportunities. It also led to the development of new social classes, such as the factory owner and the industrial worker. Of course, not all the changes brought about by the Industrial Revolution were positive. The use of steam power led to pollution and the exploitation of workers. But that's a story for another day. For today, let's focus on the incredible James Watt and his amazing inventions. His contributions to science and industry are truly remarkable, and we owe a lot of our modern conveniences to him. So next time you see a train chugging past or a factory humming in the distance, take a moment to remember James Watt, the man who harnessed the power of steam and changed the world.